Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 53rd level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Tufferdim, joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing this lovely, lovely Monday evening? We're back to our normal time this week.
Yep, we're here. I'm doing good, man. Actually, today was a day off for me because it was a federal holiday. And I am doing good, man. Just chilling. And I can't believe that the Xenoblade Nintendo Direct already happened. And they announced at least 3 more Xenoblade Nintendo Directs before the game release. I just can't believe it.
Of course.
Ryan.
The hilarious thing about your
so
statement, Garret, is that you say this in jest, but technically, if people are listening on audio feeds and not watching the live stream right now, this will actually come out after the Xenoblade Direct already happened. And they probably will have already announced 5 more Xenoblade Directs and maybe even a Fire Emblem 3 Direct as well. I'm excited.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Even though the game's out on Friday.
So excited.
Oh my God. It's I know people were excited about that. But actually, before we get into it real quick, we're going off topic for a second here.
Yes.
Because I have to ask this,
Let's do it.
Garret. How's your hype level for the Xenoblade event? Are you excited for it?
I'm looking forward to what they have to offer. I'm hesitant to even I think I will watch it even though people are really hesitant because of story spoilers of anything, which I understand. And they kind of did that before with one of the Xenoblade directs. So they had a major story spoiler.
I mean, they did that when
in the middle of it.
I remember recently with the Metroid Dread Direct that they did, it was like full of spoilers. So it was just like, if you're curious about spoilers, that's just one of those things where you obviously don't want to, watch an event like that because Nintendo likes to spoil their games. Just like Capcom does, where apparently during the Capcom showcase, they just showed the ending of Resident Evil 8 just because. They're like, you probably played that game already. It just came out a year ago, but sure, if you're watching the Capcom showcase, we know you've beaten Resident Evil 8 already, clearly, right? So.
Yeah. I don't know why they do that, man. Like, publishers and developers, like, hey, we got some information for this game. We're going to show you the ending of it. We're going to show you the spoilers. I'm like, guys, you're trying to get more people into this game. I don't know. But I'm very excited. I think I'm going to watch it just because I'm not a real stinker for spoilers. Like, it's fine I get spoiled. It's just really the lead up to that spoiler. Is it good or not? Yeah. So I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to watch it and definitely talk about it on the Nintendo Shack this week. It's going to be good.
Nice. Yeah. As for me, I'm on the edge. I'm like, do I watch it? Do I not watch it? And I'm like, maybe the best thing for me to do rather than watch it is maybe go watch a video about it afterwards, or maybe go listen to the Nintendo Jack and hear someone else talk about it, because that way I know, when I hear that information from someone else, it probably won't have spoilers in it. But I'll still get the information about the combat and stuff like that, which is the stuff I'm interested in. So.
Yeah, I definitely won't talk about spoilers because I don't think Elaine or Rebecca will even care about the story spoilers at all. So, and with Xenoblade games, I'm really knee deep in 2 right now. I know there's a connection to 1. I'm not seeing it yet. So I'm interested to see once I finish that game if there is a connection, and I'm hearing 3 it does connect 1 and 2 a lot more. So but yeah, I won't be mentioning about story spoilers at all.
It's just like when the Xbox Drive drops this week, I'm not going to give you all the Final Fantasy VII spoilers after what we saw during the Final Fantasy VII showcase or anything like that. But last question: will Donnie Reese want to hear the spoilers from you, Garret? Is that
absolutely?
Absolutely.
I think Donnie is the #1 Atelier and Xenoblade fan of all time, so he's gonna be really knee deep into it. Of course I'm gonna ask him to be on the Nintendo show, Shack show, because he's all about it.
I'm actually surprised he's not doing a live reactions to it, Garret. He could be doing
me too.
Him and Dev could be live reacting to that. Oh, that'd be so good. But anyways,
just me making fun of it.
We've gone off that. We went and did a little side quest, but let's get back to the main scenario. So let's clear the dungeon before we face the raid boss that is this show's topic. So folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of ways to do that. Number 1, if you're watching the live stream right now over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, first of all, why aren't you in bed? It's really late at night. But number 2, of course, don't forget to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel already. And ding, 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 ring that bell if you haven't already to be notified whenever we go live, or to be notified whenever we have a new video, because there's going to be lots this week, folks. Still, get excited. Strap in your seatbelts, as one might say, with carpool gaming in the name. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there as well. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts specifically, don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. In fact, Garrett, we hit so many rankings on Spotify, they're officially now posting the number of rankings, 5-star rankings on our Spotify now, so we can
Oh, cool.
them, which is nice, which only happens when you reach
nice.
10 ratings. So please keep it up, folks. We'd love for you to help us grow the show that way. And then also, if you want the show a little bit early or some exclusive content like a 4-hour episode of Sweet Hangs, head on over to patreon.com/carpoolgaming. That's how you do that. Throw a little tip, and you'll tip jar on Outcomes content. And also, again, lots of stuff coming up over there in the next couple of weeks. We've got a Scott Pilgrim episode coming up. We got the Week of Pre-podcast before the end of the month. We got lots of stuff going up on Patreon as well. That's exclusive to Patreon, so check that out.
Exclusive.
And last but not least, if you want a very fancy RPG Cave t-shirt or any one of our myriad of other carpool gaming t-shirts, head over to our merch store. The link is in the description of this video or in the show notes as well. Well, Garrett, without further ado, it's time to read from the sacred text, because I got a good one for y'all, ladies and gentlemen, this week, because we're going to be talking about our favorite non-RPGs that feature an RPG mechanic. So we're going to actually spend an entire episode of the RPG Cave, Garrett, not talking about RPGs at all. We're actually going to talk about games that really borrow elements from RPGs and, integrate them into their gameplay in a lot of awesome ways. So not only did I bring a list and Garrett brought a list, but also the audience brought a list of some suggestions as well. So we're going to get to those a little bit later on. But Garrett, I think we're going to probably do like 4 or 5 games each, I think. We didn't really talk about
this. I have a list of 6 games, but I'm sure we may have some overlap. So
I actually have 6 games as well. So yeah, we might have overlap. We might not, though. So either way, this should be a fun conversation. I'm excited to talk about this. And we're going to kind of focus on like what mechanics really make some of these special. And then, what maybe we can maybe some of our RPGs can kind of learn from this. So Garrett, would you like me to go first, or do you want to go first with this one?
How about you go first, man? I think it's been a while since you've been first on these lists, so
I do
just go for it.
So all right, so I'm going to start with one that this one was given away if you're watching on YouTube because it's on the thumbnail and it's in the title. But the first one I'm going to go with may surprise you. It's Warcraft 3. The real-time strategy game, Warcraft 3. Now, you might be saying to your monitor right now or your podcast feed, but Ryan, World of Warcraft is an RPG. What do you mean Warcraft 3 is not an RPG? Well, let me tell you a story. Well, Warcraft 3 is a real-time strategy game where you pick up one of 4 races, elves, humans, undead, and orcs. And essentially, you're just fighting each other. It plays just like, StarCraft or Age of Empires or any other real-time strategy game does. But what was interesting about Warcraft 3 and was a really revolutionary introduction for a strategy game that we haven't really seen like too many other strategy games pick up on, except for something like Halo Wars 2 or some other ones, is the ability to have what are referred to as hero units. So as you upgrade your tech tree in your base in Warcraft 3, you're allowed to summon one of 3 different heroes essentially. And you basically will have, 4 heroes to start with. And then you can also, on some maps, there will be like a mercenary outpost where you can actually summon additional heroes that appear in the campaign for Warcraft 3, but then you can actually summon into your game instead. And what these hero units do is they actually kind of act like an RPG character where they fully level up. They can acquire gear from either item shops or from killing just random enemies that you find in the world while you're on your way to your enemy's base to slaughter them. And then they get a bunch of different abilities as they level up, and it's just a really awesome streamlined role-playing mechanic baked into this real-time strategy game. And again, they put a lot of focus on the heroes where not only did you have to manage all of your armies and kind of some of the abilities that they have, but also you had to really pay attention to what your heroes' abilities are, because some of them were passive abilities, so they would just happen automatically. But a lot of times you had to make sure to activate them, and making sure to activate them at specific times to really, get a leg up over the enemy you're fighting. Not only that too, but depending on what heroes you summon, depending on your race, or whether or not, again, there's the bar area where you can summon the outside heroes. There's almost like a hero metagame too, where certain heroes are better against other heroes or weaker against other heroes. A lot of that goes into consideration when you're planning your strategy, because you constantly not only have to look at what your enemies are building and what they're developing at their bases, but also you have to see what heroes they have to then kind of counteract them with your heroes
Okay.
that you summon.
Okay.
Or
I
also
have a question. So,
Yeah.
is there multiple commanders or units, special units within each race?
Yeah. So
And
there's 4 in each race, and you can only summon 3 per game.
Okay. So, and it can be a mixture of anything, really. So
Yeah.
they can have a build up with 3 special units and have a strategy going forward with those 3 units.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, actually.
And again, if there's also that bar on the map, that also adds 10 neutral heroes on top of that. And they have their own strengths and weaknesses too, in the same way. So it's like, it really adds to the strategic element of of Warcraft as a strategy game, while also having this like cool kind of RPG element. So I really love that about the game. In fact, people loved the heroes in Warcraft 3 so much that it actually spawned one of the highest played video games of all time, and that's League of Legends, because League of Legends actually started out as a Warcraft 3 mod, where essentially they took all of the hero units in Warcraft 3 and allowed you to play them on a map. And eventually when the people who were making that decided to make their own game, they basically made their own cast of heroes to kind of, but had similar abilities to the Warcraft 3 heroes. So it's actually really interesting that how the story ties into it. Because again, League of Legends is like an action role-playing game that you play nowadays. So it ended up becoming like spawning its own RPG franchise that wasn't even owned by Blizzard. So it's just cool to see the history.
Interesting.
There. But yeah, I played Warcraft 3 a ton. I love that game. I think it's amazing. It's one of the best real-time strategy games out there, and it's a lot of fun. And I think the RPG elements are really, really added to just how special that game felt. And they never did it again, because they've never made another Warcraft real-time strategy game like after that Blizzard made World of Warcraft, and that was pretty much the end of Warcraft as a strategy franchise. And then again, its legacy kind of lives on with League of Legends. But yeah.
Do you think after World of Warcraft they have another game in mind, Blizzard? They're okay. Is it World of Warcraft 2?
World of Warcraft 2, that's what I'm thinking. I think they go to it eventually, because they'll have to, because that engine, can only go so far eventually. But
it's been like 20 years now since they something like that. That's kind of interesting. And I wish so. In Warcraft 1 was remade. Is that correct? Right, the first one.
Warcraft 3 is the only one that got a remake, because Warcraft 3.
Okay, so and that one wasn't good though, right? That one. Yeah. So I guess is there a way to get Warcraft 3 Classic like on Blizzard?
Yeah, it's just available on Battle.net or Good Old Games.
Okay, cool.
So it's I think it's
or on Good Old Games. Cool. That's awesome.
In fact, don't quote me. I'm like 90% positive that it's on Good Old Games, because I know pretty much the entire Blizzard back catalog on PC is on Good Old Games at this point. So
GOG is an underrated gem when it comes to like classic games, and like it has games that it's not on Steam, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, because Good Old Games with Blizzard, basically any of the games that don't currently exist in the Battle.net client, which are World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Call of Duty, Destiny, like all those games exist in the modern Battle.net client, but everything else outside of that's just a standalone application, should be on GOG. So that's why I'm like pretty sure it's there, because Diablo 1's there, as well as Diablo 2, StarCraft 1, the original is there, but you'd also buy them from the Blizzard store, because they also have them as well there. But either way, if you've never played Warcraft 3 before and you love real-time strategy games, it's a trip, man. It's a really, really good game. Both it and its expansion, The Frozen Throne, are amazing. And they have great campaigns that, again, just almost feel like role playing games because you are taking control of the heroes in the campaign as well. So I think all that
I
stuff
may
is
have
really
to
awesome.
put that on my wish list then on GOG or something like that because that sounds really dope. I am a huge real-time strategy fan. I love any type of real-time strategy games. I specifically Age of Empires 2 was like my go-to game. Rise of Nations was a big go-to as well. And what you mentioned of Warcraft 3 reminds me of their lines of those type of games, Rise of Legends, which really didn't go anywhere. It was just okay.
Mhm.
It was like post Rise of Nation stuff. And then also Age of Mythology was a big one to have those little special units and commanders
Mhm.
along with your real-time strategy units and management. So
Yeah. And the
that
only
was kind
other
of cool.
one I can think of that does something similar is a game called Warlord's Battle Cry, which is based off like a really
Mm,
old, Atari 2600 game, but they did it in like a reboot of it in the early 2000s, and they allowed you to have a hero unit, but it was different than Warcraft 3 because your hero unit essentially leveled and kept their levels as you played, and basically as you played more games you'd get higher and higher levels with your hero character to the point where like they'd become unstoppable eventually if you got to max level. Whereas Warcraft 3, the progression totally is instanced in each game. So you actually
mhm.
don't carry that RPG progress over to the next game,
Mhm.
which is a little
Cool.
bit different. But Warcraft 3, man, it's a trip. Definitely check it out. But I'm interested to hear what your first game is, Garrett. What do you got for me?
Definitely. So my list, when I was just thinking of it, I'm thinking of games that I've played. That I was like, okay, what are kind of the role playing mechanics that really grabbed me in those games, and what were my top? And I I actually imagined like a special time in like action game, like kind of universe between like 2010 to 2014, like around that time
Mm,
was really when a lot of action type of games start borrowing more and more role-playing mechanics. And I think this one really stuck out as a huge win for Ubisoft, and I really enjoyed this game a lot. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag was one of the games that I shot out before they really got into actual role-playing games in the, the
yeah.
last three entries. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag really essentially felt like the first big Assassin's Creed game. It's like, oh, it's bigger than just this linear based game that they had previously. 3 kind of touched it a little bit with some open areas, but I think 4 Black Flag really nailed it down. And a lot of different like role playing mechanics that this game had. It was a lot of more upgradable weapons and armor, and you can like scavenge those around by destroying ships, or like going to different islands. And of course, you got this huge map full of question marks, and you just go to those question marks and just pick them all out. And so there's a lot of side missions in there. I really enjoyed the ship combat and the ship building and progressing what you had in there in order to get the best armor on your ship, the best cannons, and so you can go deeper out into different seas. And all 4 points of the island has these major ship bosses, which was so cool
Nice.
to see. And I really enjoyed the exploration of this game alongside with the story. The story is what it is. It's an Assassin's Creed story. Um, take it what you will with that. But I really like seeing how they use the Assassin's Creed kind of mechanics and parkour and melding it with this Caribbean island open world just action game.
Mhm.
Like it's kind of cool to see this game coming together. Got it released in 2013. It was a cross-gen title between Xbox 360, PS3, and PS4 and Xbox One. And it was also on Wii U, interestingly.
Of course.
But I played this on 360. It ran not so great on 360. I remember just seeing these scenes, and it was just like the choppiest things ever. I'm like, why am I playing this on
Yeah.
the Xbox? But anyways, I played all the way through on my 360 with Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Really enjoyed it. My time with it. A lot of hours put into it. It was like kind of, other than Skyrim, my second big open world game I played. So,
Yeah.
well, did you play Assassin's Creed Black Flag,
So
Ryan?
I have two things to say about this. Number one, guess who played Assassin's Creed Black Flag on the Wii U, Garrett? This guy
Oh,
right here.
goodness.
Yeah, because
I heard, oh, is it good?
it wasn't terrible. It ran better than Assassin's
Yeah.
Creed 3 on Wii U, because I also played that there too. But
Oh, goodness.
I mean, I at the time, Garrett, I was all about the Wii U, but it was also I got it on the Wii U because at the time I didn't have a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One. I mean, it took me
Hmm.
months to get those consoles, which was around when Assassin's Creed Black Flag came out, which is it came out with
Yeah.
the console launch. So I was like, oh, I'll just get it on Wii U then, because because I know it'll perform better and look better than the 360 or the PS3, because that was true with a lot of games at that time. It's part
Yeah.
of the reasons why when Black Ops 2 came out, I played it on Wii U,
Yep.
stuff like that. Like I played it on Wii U for that reason, because it was like that nice kind of in between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3 essentially for me.
Hmm.
So that's where I played it, and I did play it, but I never finished it because I never really got into it, because I've mentioned this on other shows, Garrett, but I should mention it here for any of our new listeners or for people who just don't listen to our other shows. I'm personally not a big fan of pirates. In fact, whenever
All
pirates
right.
are in a game, they're kind of a big turnoff for me. I just don't like pirates. I just can't get into anything that has pirates in it. Like even something like as beloved as like Secret of Monkey Island. You know, as much as I love the humor in those games, it's about pirates, and I just can't do it.
It's all about pirates, man.
Yeah, it has to be like a really special game to win me over, and unfortunately, just Black Flag wasn't. But to your points about the RPG elements, I thought that definitely kept me playing longer than I probably would if it was just a regular
Right.
Assassin's Creed game
Yeah.
like Assassin's Creed 3. So definitely, I felt the carrot on the end of the stick as far as me wanting to play that game. But yeah, just my distaste for pirates just made me not want to continue with it. But yeah,
Oh,
but that's
man.
why like I love something like Syndicate way more, where like I love the setting of 1800s Britain, and I love the grappling hook in that game, and I love the main characters in that game. So it's just like,
Great.
that's like way more up my alley than something with pirates. So
I totally understand that. And even Unity, even though I had its like like technical performance not so great with that game, I really enjoyed that one specifically because of one, the parkour. That's where it started.
yeah,
Completely changed the game where you can go up and down really seamlessly, and also the missions to attack your targets multiple different ways, either the sneaky way or the front bashful way. Yeah, I have a love for these sets of Assassin's Creed games than any other like any other sets of games of the franchise. I like the Ezio trilogy. It's okay. It's classic. But I really do like these three Assassin's Creed games. Really opened up and borrowed a lot more role playing game mechanics until it actually became RPGs in the later entries. So,
yeah, it
anyways.
definitely went down that road. Once they got a taste of the RPG stuff, Garrett, they never went back, and I'm glad that they didn't, because honestly, like, I know some people always like. I know there are some people out there who like clamor for the days of. I just want them all to go back to Assassin's Creed 2 and kind of be that style of game. But I personally just would rather them just keep doing what they're doing, because I love the modern era of Assassin's Creed so much more than I do like the older games. But that's just me, being the RPG guy, of course. So of course I do.
There are rumors of a spin-off Assassin's Creed second game being more stealth-like, more linear-like, and I would love that personally. I think I just like a more digestible Assassin's Creed game. These things, like I played through Origins, and man, that took a while. And the other two, Odyssey and Valhalla, are much bigger than Origins too. So yeah, I just like a more digestible Assassin's Creed game than 80 or 90 hours.
I think
of it.
you and I both agree on that. Like, the Assassin's Creed games don't need to be, 80 hours long, which again, Valhalla,
Yeah.
it took me 80 hours to beat, and that was the longest it took me to beat any of them. But even then, like, that's just way too much, too long. It just didn't need to be that long. So yes, I hope that they, practice restraint with whatever the next one is, even though we know the next one is just going to be a live service game. They've already announced that. And it's just going to be Assassin's Creed Forever, essentially, or Infinite is, what it's called. So
Ubisoft is gonna do what they're gonna do in order to save themselves, and if it's gonna be a live service Assassin's Creed game, that's what it's gonna be. So,
Hey now, Garrett, if you
but
want a
Fall
linear
Guys,
game from Ubisoft, that's what Avatar, the game coming out this fall based off the James Cameron movie, is going to be all about, just for you. So
great.
I'm actually like I'm mildly excited for that game because the people that made the Division are making that game, and it might not be that.
That's
bad,
true.
but
It's true.
well. Moving on, I forgot to preface this at the start, Garrett, but I'm going to preface this now. Every single game that I have on my list is in a completely different genre from each other. So I kind of wanted to highlight like a bunch of different genres of games and how they take advantage of this. And I'm going to move on to a brawler or a beat 'em up game because there is actually a few franchises that have actually been using, RPG elements for a long time. And I mean, the most common example that a lot of people probably think of is something like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I think actually uses RPG elements in a really excellent way. But the game I actually wanted to highlight here that actually I think uses RPG mechanics a little bit more is River City Girls. So this came out a couple years ago from Way Forward, and it's based in the River City Ransom franchise, going all the way back to the NES. And what's interesting about those games is that they've always had, even going back to the first game, there's always been a level up system in those games, and as your character levels up, you'll learn new moves. But in the earlier games, it didn't really affect your health pools or your power or anything like that. Whereas River City Girls, they basically took the leveling element that they had in the older River City Ransom games and kind of also tacked on, like, as your characters progressively become higher level, they also become stronger, so they kill the enemies faster, or they can take more hits, which helps you deal with some of the more difficult levels towards the end of the game, but also means too that you can't really shortcut to get towards the end of the game, because if your character's not leveled high enough towards the end, you're not going to be able to get through it. But it kind of has this like open world aspect to it where you can kind of go across the city and go and fight older enemies to get additional experience, or go save up some money and then go spend it at the store to basically get some new abilities, or spend some money to go to the gym to kind of level up your characters and stuff like that.
Nice.
So I love the level of customization that River City Girls had, and it really, even though it wasn't an RPG, it felt like it could be an RPG in a lot of ways. And I just love how all that stuff is just seamlessly integrated into the experience, and I thought it was just more fun for it. Like, and this came fresh off my mind actually playing Turtle Shredder's Revenge this week, because there's also a level up system in that game in the campaign, but for the most part, as you basically obtain points by killing enemies in that game, you'll basically hit different thresholds or different milestones that give you basically a different reward each time. But it's not really affecting like the stats of the character or anything like that, or it's really just giving you like either an extra move or just giving you an extra one up or something like that, which I just don't think is as deep as something like River City Girls, or it's customizable. Yeah. So, which again, I think works well for Turtles, because it's just gonna appeal to a more casual audience anyways than something like River City Girls does. But I love River City Girls. It's one of my favorite, beat 'em ups of all time, and I'm so excited for the sequel to see what they do with that one, because that's supposed to come out still sometime this summer. We don't know when, but at some point
this summer, we'll see.
This summer is what they keep saying. Maybe it'll be at the Nintendo Direct tomorrow with Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
That would be
cool. But
yes, that would be the one more thing.
Of course. You'll hear that song from Megan McDuffie, who does the soundtrack for River City Girls, and you'll be like, there you go.
Of course.
I can't believe that. Although, actually, my real prediction for that is actually just Lollipop Chainsaw just comes out, Garrett, and then we have.
Wouldn't that be great?
I'm actually super excited for that. By the way, it's not just Donnie who's excited about Lollipop Chainsaw. But going back to River City Girls, I think that I love the RPG elements they put in here, and I think it makes it a better experience overall with them in the experience. So that's why I wanted to make sure to highlight it there. And again, lots of brawlers have been doing this too, so it's not just unique to this game. So if you like beat 'em ups, or if you like action RPGs but you've never really played a lot of beat 'em ups, I would encourage y'all to check some of these out, whether this or Shredder's Revenge or something else.
Yeah, I played a little bit of Shredder's Revenge. I just think that game specifically is calling to the people that played it in the arcades.
Yes, absolutely.
Like you played this TMNT game in the arcades, and we are bringing it back full force. And I think that's a great thing to, and especially it's just a brand new game in that style, in that vein, in there. And a lot of people who, have that, was in that age group, have kids now, and they're playing with their kids too and having a great time. So that's so cool. River City Girls, I keep hearing about it all the time. I hear about it's an underrated gym. So I'll definitely I think I need to check it out sometime. And I know River City Girls too. A lot of people are hyped about it, as well. And I think Donnie is too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
super cool.
I was gonna say, like, I remember Donnie getting into River City Girls like earlier this year. I think he was posting screenshots for it. I'm like, yes, Donnie, yes.
Yeah.
Finally, someone else I can talk about this gosh darn game, because I played it a couple of years ago and no one else but me played it. So, yeah. And it was also on Game Pass for like 2 years, and eventually it left Game Pass. So you kind of missed out on that one. But
yeah,
either way, it's still really fun. So
cool. I think one more brawler that pops into my head that actually brought RPG mechanics in, which I couldn't believe, was actually the newest Super Smash Brothers, and its newest mode. I forgot exactly what the mode's called, but it's the one that you go throughout the board, and essentially, as you go throughout the board and play these different matches, you get more and more of like different power-ups and perks, and it's a progression system really. And then you have amiibos that have level up systems and stats, and it's just like, man, even the brawler, one of the most famous brawlers out there, can't escape from the RPG mechanics and having a little bit of entertainment in there in itself. So.
But and that all goes back to the Wii U version of Super Smash Brothers, where they essentially that's why they invented Amiibo in the first place, Garrett, was so you could save your like tailored stats version of like Donkey Kong on your Donkey Kong Amiibo. Like that was the whole thing on Wii U, essentially. Like that's why they made one for every character.
And 3DS.
Yeah, and 3DS. I almost forgot about that. In
yes,
fact,
I've
the 3DS version
3DS
had like
exclusively.
The 3DS version actually had like the better maps, I think, anyways. So.
Really?
Yeah. I still to this day love the Pac-Man level that's in that game. We never got that level again, even in the even in Ultimate. So there you go.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But anyways, Garrett, what's your next game? Or was it Smash?
All right, I'm gonna knock another Ubisoft game out of the park, and it's another major franchise that's been it's one of the first ones that really became popular. Far Cry 3. I played this back in it's around Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag time, around 2012, 2013, something like that. Far Cry 3 was the first game of the Far Cry franchise that went to open world, but also putting in a lot of RPG mechanics in there, including like a level up system of some kind with skills and skill systems. And I think the most important part of this game that really got me into it is the crafting in there, the upgradable systems and pelts. There was a lot of interesting things it was trying to bake into this world, into this the Far Cry universe that panned out for them really well. And I think they just did the same thing with Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Is this, let's make it open world, let's kind of bring out these RPG mechanic systems, and let's put a cool story in there and see what we get. And I think Far Cry 3 is one of the best, like, kind of it sticks with my mind the most, even though probably Far Cry 5 or 6 is probably better at this point because of just being more modern or whatever. Far Cry 3 really sticks in my head. It's like, hey, this is what it started with, is that game.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mix of the crafting and also like the forts and the bases that you just go from one point to the next and just figure out a way to like eliminate all the soldiers. You want to do a sneak lead, you want to go up front about it. It was a really neat action adventure first person shooter. Of course, Voss, the villain, was iconic as well.
Yeah.
So it really sticks in my mind as that is a game with RPG mechanics that worked out for the best for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Far Cry 3. super good.
It was the only game I can remember running out to the ocean so I could go hunt sharks in order to upgrade, certain skills for my character, or get like a specific tattoo that granted you like extra powers and stuff like that. Like all that stuff was super cool. And they did have like some of the elements that you were describing in Far Cry 2, which was also an open world game, but it was very different. Like it was more of like a story based, more of a linear open world game. Like you still had the open world like Africa available to you the same way as all the other Far Cry games, but the story played out a lot differently. So it was definitely like Far Cry 3 with the base system and everything else that really kind of revolutionized that formula and in the method you described. I also love this game too. Like I remember playing it I think it was December of 2013 is when it came out. Cause I remember there was a big thing about that game being like out where it just kind of missed everyone's Game of the Year awards at that time because it came out in December, which was just a weird time for this game to come out in. But I remember I
think it was December 2012 actually, because I remember borrowing it.
Yeah.
I was borrowing a game from my dorm neighbor actually.
Because 2013 was actually the year the PS4 and Xbox One came out. So yes, you're definitely right about that. I was wrong about that. But Far Cry 3, I played it a ton. I loved it as well for all the reasons you talked about. And it had amazing RPG elements. In fact, to this day, it's still my favorite Far Cry game besides Blood Dragon, which was the expansion for
Far Cry 3. Blood Dragon's so good.
Because I just love 80s movies. So, of course, I'm going to love Blood Dragon probably a little bit more. Plus, I liked the more condensed nature of it, too, like we talked about with Assassin's Creed. But I also love 3. I think it's a fantastic game, and it still really holds up. I still think it's probably my favorite Far Cry game. The only one that kind of rivals it for me is Far Cry 5, which I also really enjoyed as well, but everyone has kind of mixed feelings on that one, I think.
Yeah, 5 is a very solid game. I'm still kind of I'm kind of just coasting off with it, and it's really good. It's very solid. I think it went back to the Far Cry 3 roots, because Far Cry 4, it felt too repetitive, too spongy, too many things, and it felt very repetitive, which that you could say that for a lot of different games, but really for this for Far Cry 4 it was like a little too much, whereas 5 was like, okay, let's cut off all the fat and just focus on what the message is in this game. And I think 5 did a pretty good job going back to the 3 roots, and I'm very much looking forward to Far Cry 6. I have it. Got it on sale. It's on my Series X. So after I'm done with 5, I'll definitely go to 6.
Yeah. And my problem, I've talked about it with 6. It just, with 6, I thought it was all right. It just ran into the same problem that Assassin's Creed Valhalla does, where it's like, it didn't think less was more, essentially, which is my only kind of complaint with that one. It goes on a little too long, but that's besides the point. Either way, Far Cry 3 is amazing. Y'all should go play it if you've ever played it before.
The good one.
But next up, I'm going to go really out there with this one, Garrett, because the hat I'm wearing is actually a little hint as to what I'm going to talk about. And that's NHL 22, baby. Let's go. It's time to talk about hockey on the show. Now, Garrett, you're giving me the facepalm, but let me explain. So, first of all, have you ever played an NHL game? I don't know what your history with hockey games
I've played NHL. I mean, I've played games with my cousin, and my cousin's a huge hockey fan, and he had some NHL, I think on like Nintendo 64 or something like that. So I played some. Yeah.
All the hockey games on N64, including like Wayne Gretzky's hockey, are all really bad. So that's why I'm like,
okay.
Oh, no.
Well, that's my experience with NHL. But I'll give it to you that sports games, a lot of, like, you could say role-playing game mechanics in there. So
here's what I'm going to get into. So essentially, because the reason I asked that is I didn't know if you'd played any of the single player modes for a lot of these hockey games, but the NHL series for a long time has been doing what's referred to as Be a Pro mode. And this actually isn't just unique to NHL. They also do this in Madden, as well as when like in FIFA, as well as NBA Live, when EA was actually making NBA games. But what was cool about Be a Pro mode is basically you create your own character, and then you actually assign like one of 4 different types of players to your character, almost like a character class, but not really. It's like it's you can be a goon if you want to, or you can be a power forward or a sniper if you're a shooter, or you can be a goalie and have like different goalie types essentially. And then from there you can tweak some of your character's stats, because your Be a Pro character has individual stats based on your shooting and your passing and all of the different attributes of a hockey player. And then basically, once you create that player, it puts you into a situation where you basically play like the Calder Cup, which is essentially like the end of like the junior season, essentially. So basically, right before you would join the NHL, you would play in the Calder Cup to try and win the championship there. And depending on how you play there, you then go to the NHL draft where you get drafted by a team. And then basically, as you progress through your character's career with whatever team you get drafted with, you actually get points to spend to increase your stats, as well as you can buy different gear from different vendors that then gives you, upgraded stats from there as well. So again, even though it's not a hockey RPG, it borrows heavily with a bunch of like RPG elements, but then you actually go into the hockey game itself, and then you're just playing like NHL 22, with whatever team you're playing as versus the other team, but you only play as your created character. You don't play as any other characters on the ice. All those are computer controlled, regardless of if they're on your team or the opponent's team. And you basically just like, if you're a right winger, you just play that position, and that it's like a simulation of like what it would be like to be a professional hockey player, while also giving the RPG goodness of stats and gear and classes and stuff like that. So I think the NHL games or Madden also does a good job with it as well. I haven't really tinkered with the FIFA one too much because I just don't like football as much as a lot of other people. But man, NHL 22 I think does an amazing job with Be a Pro, and I think that the hockey stats are super cool. None of that, but how often do we get to talk about sports games on podcasts, Garrett? I wanted to make sure to highlight sports games here, and EA's been doing this for like years and years now, and it's always really well done. So I wanted to make sure to highlight it here because it's pretty cool.
Definitely. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense to bring in sports games into this conversation because, even though they're not role-playing games, they're sports games, but there's so many type of role-playing mechanics that can be essentially inside these games. And Yarden said, "Where's the court at MLB? The MLB The Show fits this very well."
Yes,
totally right. Yeah, MLB The Show does a pretty good job of like having your own type of character and progressing throughout their career. I think it's really neat that these sports games are kind of, it's like bringing a more personable approach to these games and having a character to just go throughout the career from beginning to end. I think people would spend a lot more time with those sports games than just like, oh, let's just go, this team versus this team. All right, let's go. Let's have a game or some tournament or some, football league or whatever. You have specific character and characters that you kind of take care of. So,
well, to put it in perspective, Garrett, just sorry to interrupt you. If you play through the character's entire 10-year career in the Be a Pro mode, you have to play 800 hockey games if your team doesn't make the playoffs, and then if it does make the playoffs, you're adding another 100 to 200 on top of that. So you're playing about 1,000 games of hockey by the time it's all done at 20 to 30 minutes per game. So that's a long playtime to get through it.
Well, isn't a typical okay? So I don't know much hockey. Isn't it a typical career like a lot of hockey games? Like how many hockey games? Isn't it?
A traditional NHL player is usually well over the 1,000 game mark because they're usually playing from
1,000 game mark
because they're playing from age 18 until they're age 40 for most players.
Oh, okay. No, that makes sense. I'm just saying per year.
How many you only get 82 games in a season.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. And then it's the playoffs. If you're in the playoffs, you're in 7-game series. OBS says it's disconnecting for some reason. Oh, and now it says...
Oh, no, it's good. It's back.
But the audio listeners won't even know what this is because they won't hear this part. But anyways, Garrett, moving on. Now that I've talked about hockey enough, what's your next game you want to talk about?
All right, what is my next game? I'm still going through the action type of games. I like how you're diversifying a little bit with sports and brawlers, but I want to, highlight the ones that really brought out when I was going through this change from non-RPG to really hardcore role-playing game person. And one of them that just came out 2013 or something by Arcane Studios, Dishonored 1. Is a stealth action-based game with a lot of role-playing mechanics behind it. Dishonored 1 follows a person that was falsely accused of killing the queen or whatever of the nation, and now he's getting hunted down by the government and the soldiers. And this city of Dunwall is super dark, super creepy. I really love the atmosphere behind this game. I like the style of it for sure. It's like this cartoonish, like 1800s English vibe going on. What I really enjoy about this game specifically is that it has a system called the chaos system, where basically if you're more quiet and more of a pacifist, it's going to be more towards the good ending. If you're more destructive and like to kill everyone, then you're going to get the more uh, evil or destructive ending or whatever. Throughout each of these levels, there is like kind of this open level area, and they're handcrafted. And basically, you can go throughout any points of this map to fulfill your main objective, but there's many side objectives. There's many kind of collectibles called bone charms that kind of enhances the ability, but can also bring negatives to your character. Your character itself has a lot of role-playing mechanics, like many skills, such as like blade weapons and supernatural abilities, and then you can build it out however you want with skill points and a skill system, um, so on and so forth. So what I really enjoyed about this game, its approach, kind of really baking in role-playing mechanics with the stealth adventure type of system going on here. Really enjoyed the story of this. I still need to play Dishonored 2. That is on my list for sure. I actually got it back in 2016 or
Nice.
whenever it came out.
Yeah.
I played the first level and just never drew back with it, but definitely would like to go back into it. I heard Dishonored 2 was a really great sequel to it. So, and I really enjoyed the different approaches to the targets as well. You can be, again, if you can find a way to be a pacifist, you'll find a way. But you could just go in and just kill them and be very chaotic about it. It'll be super hard because every soldier will come after you then. But it's actually pretty cool to see some of these YouTube videos going crazy with the killing and supernatural abilities, going super fast with their characters. So yeah, Dishonored 1, man, was a super cool game when I played it. What about you, Ryan? I think you're not too much into the Dishonored franchise, but
yeah, it's just like Arcane's games. Just I don't know what it is about
doesn't
them.
hit with you.
Like I love the worlds they create. Like I think they're all like really interesting and fascinating. Like I love this idea of this society that relies on whale oil in order to power everything. And I love kind of the special abilities and stuff that you get in Dishonored. And I like stealth games too, but it's just like there's just something about their games I'm not into. And it's not even just Dishonored either. It's Prey. I felt the same way about Deathloop as well. So
Okay.
I think it's just for whatever reason, Arcane's games in particular don't, hit for me. It's why, like, even though something like Redfall actually seemed promising when we watched it at the Xbox showcase as well, I'm also like not super stoked for it because I know how I feel about Arcane's games. But at the same time, I'm going to try it because it's on Game Pass. So I always, and that's the thing with Arcane games, because maybe I am always thinking in the back of my head when I play them, like, this will be the one that gets me. This will be the one that gets me to want to play this game. But I haven't found that game yet, but I always like to try them to see, like, if they can get their hooks into me. Sometimes even multiple times, because I've played the opening to Dishonored 5 times now in order to try and, get into that game. And I just can't. Same with Dishonored 2. I felt the same way about that game. So, which is too bad because I love stealth games, but it's just, it's Arcane in particular. I don't know what it is about those games, but
is it like the blink system? Is it the way the level is handled? Because I do understand with Dishonored 1, I think the one pet peeve is that a soldier can instantly see you. Yeah. And it's just like, it's very sensitive. It's a little too sensitive.
Yeah. I think it's just a tipping of the scales kind of thing, where it's between the enemies kind of noticing you from, a million miles away to the way the game kind of handles, because it handles a lot differently than other games. Like I can feel the difference while playing it, but not, in a good way for me personally, to like just, enemy placement, just all kinds of things on the tipping scale that kind of like, makes it go down for me a little bit, which is too bad because I want to like those games. But
it's so cool. It reminds me a lot of like Bloodborne when I was playing it this year. Just the amount of secret tunnels and like different passageways of a level itself. I think they're at the point of like Bloodborne-ish in a way, because there's just so many different things to do in one level, and collecting all the different things, and making sure that you can get the good or the bad route. I like that type of freedom and player agency, and that's what really drew to me. And also the world itself. It's super cool. I really enjoyed what they created there. Dishonored 1, it's on Game Pass. I think, right?
I'm actually pretty sure both Dishonored 1 and 2 are on Game Pass.
And the whole thing, like the whole franchise is on Game Pass.
Well, yeah, every Bethesda game's there. And eventually Deathloop later this year, I would assume.
And it's also Series X optimized. It has 60 frames, and if you put it on your internal hard drive, oh my gosh, it is such a difference. It's such a game changer. I played this game on 360. The loading times were like at least 3 minutes, and it's just terrible. It just breaks your pacing entirely. And then on Series X, it's like, boom, a millisecond.
You missed out, Garrett, because you said you didn't play Dishonored 2. Oh man, the load screens in that game on 1X or just PlayStation 4. Oh my God, they're so long. They're so long.
I played it on PS4 a little bit. I remember those.
Those load times were worse somehow with that game. But you're right. Like if you play it on modern gen, it's like instant, which is
it's so fast.
Yeah,
it's
not
like
as fast
they
as
updated it, and
not as fast as Resident Evil 2, because we just got the current gen patch for that recently, and like you load that game up and it's like you snap your fingers and you're in the game. Like it's that fast, which is crazy.
That's what they did with Dishonored 1 though. They updated it fully to make sure that it's like a snap of a finger. All right, you're back to the previous. So that's much better now with the pacing with that game.
Yeah. For sure.
But yeah,
that's what killed the pacing for me with something like Bloodborne 2, where the load screens in Bloodborne are so long and you die so much in that game, and it was just like very annoying eventually. Which maybe one day, Garrett, maybe we get a PS5 version of Bloodborne, and then I'll go back and play that game again.
Hey, if we keep talking about it, it will exist. will into existence.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on, because we're an hour into the show and we still have 2 more games to talk about. I wanna get a little bit weird, Garrett, because I talked about sports games, I talked about brawlers, and moving past brawlers, we've also got fighting games. And the fighting game I wanted to bring in here that actually does RPG elements really, really well is Soul Calibur 2. This is on the original Xbox, the GameCube, and the PlayStation 2. And in the base game itself, if you're just fighting one-on-one like normal, there are no RPG elements of any kind in this game. So you might be asking yourself, well, Ryan, where do the RPG elements come in with this game? So there's a campaign in the game called Weapon Master Mode. And what you do in Weapon Master Mode is, first of all, for those that are kind of unfamiliar with Soul Calibur as a fighting series, it's a 3D fighting game, kind of like something like Tekken or Dead or Alive, but it's mostly focused around weapons. So, and that's kind of what its differentiator is between other fighting games that are in 3D, where each character has a unique weapon that they're wielding, whether it's a bow staff or a sword and shield or, 2, tonfas or something like that. Like, all the characters feel really unique because of their weapons. So what they did is they took this to a crazy degree in Weapon Master Mode, where essentially you travel the world as whatever character you decide to play as, and you're collecting different weapons that are upgrades to the weapons that character can use. So let's say you're playing as Nightmare and you use a claymore as your weapon. You're basically obtaining different claymores that all kind of have all these different stats on them, while you're also upgrading your character as you go through it as well. Not only that, but some of the weapons you find are cursed, so they'll actually give you negative stats or have a negative ability attached to them, like you'll like periodically lose health while you're in battle, or sometimes you'll take extra damage, or you'll move like really slowly, but they'll have like crazy upsides, like you'll deal like triple the damage, but you'll have this downside throughout the battle. So it plays with the weapon system in Soul Calibur 2 in such a awesome way. I just loved it. I played that mode to death. And what was cool about it too, it was kind of one of the closest things we had at the time to a Legend of Zelda RPG, because you could play as Link in the GameCube version of Soul Calibur 2. And you can play as him in Weapon Master mode, so you're getting different versions of the Master Sword that have different stats associated with them, and it was just super fun. Like it was such a good mode, and we never saw it come back until the newest Soul Calibur game, Soul Calibur 6. But just not a lot of people checked that game out, or if they did, they didn't really play that mode too much. But Weapon Master mode was so fun in Soul Calibur 2. And it just, again, got the RPG juices flowing for a fighting game fan like myself, because I love fighting games. Soul Calibur is one of my favorite fighting franchises, and it's definitely one of my favorite 3D fighting franchises, and I loved Weapon Master Mode. It was such a unique idea on fighting games, and we just haven't really seen that idea get replicated by other people, so I loved it. It was great.
I hope fighting games kind of bring in more RPG type of stuff, because they would probably entice even me to play a little bit more. I can't deal with other than Smash Bros. I can't deal with fighting as much. It's just it doesn't feel good to me. I don't know why. Maybe I just didn't grow up with the arcades.
Well, I mean, even though I grew up with the arcades, I didn't play a lot of fighting games in arcades. Like a lot of times, I would play the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or The Simpsons or something like that, or the Terminator 2 arcade machine with the Uzi pistols that you're shooting Terminators with. Like that's
right.
That's more the stuff I grew up with. Even though we would play Street Fighter 2 from time to time, it was mostly not that. It was actually home consoles, specifically playing games with my older brother Kyle. Like we played a lot of Street Fighter 2, a lot of Mortal Kombat, and it was all just the home versions and less of the arcade stuff. But that's just how I got into it, because I grew up with it, but not in kind of the same way that you would think a lot of people probably would.
Okay, cool. Interesting, man.
Yeah.
Good Moving stuff.
On. Garrett, what's your next one?
All right. This one, I think, well, I wouldn't say it's a role-playing game. There's at least two other genres I would say above this one. It is a roguelike, and it is deck building game. And this game is Slay the Spire.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, Ryan. This game is so addicting. I love it to death. If I ever go back into it, I probably would stop everything in my tracks to just play this game over and over and over again. So Slay the Spire is a deck building game that you kind of just go through a series of battles, card building battles against enemies, and it kind of just goes through level by level. Basically what you do with that is you kind of like have a set of cards in your hand, and then you spin based off of the mana that you have in your battle, and then of course it does damage and skills and various things like that. And then, of course, the character you chose in the beginning has special types of skills themselves. And then as you go out through in each level, you get to give up cards, you take in cards, and that will give you different strategies. And, of course, the enemies can have different HP, different attacks, different buffs and debuffs. As a turn-based strategy card game. Lots of role-playing mechanics baked into here, though. The cards themselves have buffs and debuffs. It's turn-based. It's essentially turn-based game, so it's a lot to deal with that. But it is a roguelike first and foremost, because once you die, you just keep going back. And there's permanent upgrades to each of these characters. But man, oh man, just try it out, guys. I think it's on Game Pass again.
Yep.
Don't quote me on that.
I'm actually pretty sure it was. And also it was on PlayStation Plus a couple months ago, so you might have actually redeemed it but just never played it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed that one so much.
Yeah. I think we talked about it on the show before as well, but I know a lot of people I know there's like a cult following for that game. Like the people who played it and love that game. I mean, you have to be into cards at least a little bit, but beyond that, I think it's probably a good example. But I've never played it, but I've only heard good things about it. Maybe one day, Garrett. It's on the pile.
Maybe one day. Just one battle. It only take like 30 minutes.
I'm too busy replaying AI the Somnium files, Garrett, so I can play AI on this.
For Nirvana Initiative?
Yeah.
For the new one?
So I can get ready to play it on Friday. I'm very excited because I got my collector's edition coming, Garrett. I'm excited to open it too. But also, fun fact, I saw the user scores for that, Garrett, and you might have gotten a little boost in fantasy this week for points.
Oh, wait. Is it on my league too? Oh, crap.
You have it in the Carpool Gaming League because you stole it from me because you're a jerk.
Oh, yeah.
I totally
Okay, I have it on my other one, too, on the PSVG one.
Yeah. Last time I checked, it was sitting at an 86, so pretty good.
That's good.
Pretty good. But anyways, moving on with the show, I'm gonna give my last one now. I have an honorable mention that I'll talk about afterwards. But I'm gonna talk about one of my all-time favorite games. Or I should say, one of my all-time favorite modern games, like post 2000s games. I actually reviewed this game over on my old website, Game Moose, game-moose.com, which still exists, and my old review for this game is still there, where I gave this game a 10 out of 10 because I loved it so much. But not an RPG, because this game's actually a visual novel, but also a detective game and also a court simulator, because this game is Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Danganronpa series. I have, love those games. In fact, when I went to Japan for the first time, I actually took my Vita with me, and I was playing Danganronpa on the entire flight there, and just got really engrossed in that experience. And I've loved the franchise ever since. So of course, while I was there, I made sure to buy like a stuffed Monokuma and bring it back with me, which is just in the other room. But V3 in particular, I think, did a good job of bringing RPG elements into the experience. In fact, there's an entire section of the game that's basically its own mini RPG. That's just, where you basically walk around this, town that looks like a town in Final Fantasy, and there's a bunch of quests and stuff that you have to go on. But then you also earn stats in the real world that allow you to unlock different skills that allow you to use them in the debate sections of the game, where you're trying to figure out who murdered the other student, because that game, for those who haven't played Danganronpa before, it's all about 16 high school students basically locked in an area together, in this case a school essentially, and they're forced to murder each other essentially in order to escape.
Great.
They have to kill someone and not be discovered in order for them to basically be able to leave. So in Killing Harmony, you go to these trial sections that feel like they're ripped straight out of something like Ace Attorney, but then you can use some of the skills that you earn with XP during these trials to allow you to have extra time to deliberate on some items, or if you fail some items, you can get a little bit of a redo, or certain things like that. Like, I think it introduces a lot of cool RPG elements to the gameplay, combined with, again, it having its own self-contained RPG in the game itself, which is just a nice touch as well. But it's not very often you get to talk about a visual novel having RPG elements, but Danganronpa V3 managed to pull it off in some spectacular ways, and I think that game's amazing. It's got an amazing story with a great cast of characters, and I love the twists and turns that they go on with the story in that game. And Monokuma is just one of my favorite, all-time video game villains. So
Monokuma is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Danganronpa, so gotta include that.
Do you have to play the previous two for this one?
No, because it's actually, of all three games, it's actually the one that's not tied to anything else. But
that's nice.
It's tied into this bigger meta thing that I don't want to spoil. So it definitely helps if you've played the first two games, but you don't have to play them, because it actually.
I played the first one. I attempted it like twice. I really want to try it out though. I think it's on Game Pass.
Well, yeah. The first two Danganronpa games are. The third one hasn't come to Xbox yet.
Cool.
But it probably will. Like, it's on trajectory. I would imagine it comes out before the end of the year, and it'll be on Game Pass too. But Spike Chunsoft's putting them out, but they're also putting out the Somnium Files, which is why I think that's why there's a little bit of a delay.
Spike Chunsoft, man, they're just churning it with all these.
They got some good stuff over there, man. I really like them a lot. So there you go.
Me too.
Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony, originally published by NIS, mind you, which was an older reference to an older episode that we did about NIS. But Garrett, give me your last game that we're going to talk about tonight.
All right, so the last game I want to mention came out on Switch exclusively by Platinum Games, Astral Chain.
Yes.
Man, oh man, this was such a fun time on the Switch. Just super gorgeous, futuristic setting. Followed this, your main character, along with like this linear story with your family that you're trying to figure out what's going on with this world with these kind of like evil kind of viruses happening and invading their kind of city or whatever. And the main kind of novelty behind this game is that you have these things called Legion that's connected to you with this chain. And these Legion, or these monsters, have different classes, like a bowman, and one's like a wolf or a beast, and another one's like a warrior. And they all have different types of stats or whatever when you're attacking other enemies. and essentially you have the cable, and then you can use that cable to wrap around enemies and do these super cool fighting combos or quick time events in order to destroy an enemy. Man, I really enjoyed the style of this game. It was super cool. A lot of kind of stat building or whatever with your Legion as well. I remember that for sure. But using different types of classes with your Legions was kind of like the biggest thing behind this game. You had to use different Legion in certain areas of the map for certain enemies as well. So, and it was a really great story. Very solid. I hope to see Astral Chain 2 sooner rather than later, although they need to push Bayonetta 3 out there before they could do anything else. But
Yep.
yeah, man, Astral Chain, I played it, I think not last year, but the year before in 2020. And I couldn't believe how much I really enjoyed this game. So what do you think about Astral Chain, Ryan?
That game's awesome. I love Astral Chain. I think
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite Platinum games, and definitely like
Yeah.
if we didn't know Bayonetta 3 was already coming, I'd be like, where the heck is the sequel for this game? Although we did hear it didn't
Yeah.
really sell that well, so I just think a lot of people kind of missed the boat with this one for whatever reason. Which shame on them for not playing this game.
Shame on them.
because Astral Chain is
Just
great.
get it.
It's one of the best action RPGs, like fast action RPGs of the Switch era essentially. So I would recommend people checking that out as well because I also think it's awesome. I didn't have it on my list, but I definitely think that I'm glad that you included it here, Garret, because Astral Chain's awesome, and I love the RPG elements in that game too. So good call on that one.
Yeah.
So then to kind of round things out real quick, because I had one other honorable mention, and if I don't mention this, then Sean Capri will continue to yell at his podcast player that he's listening to right now, where he's listening to this back, because I haven't mentioned this game yet, but if he was here, he would mention it, and that's Forza Horizon 5. Because it also has a lot of RPG elements, the way you kind of level, your Horizon Festival up, and the way you acquire different cars and stuff like that. Very RPG-esque to the point where it's pretty much borderline on just being an open world racing RPG. But I wanted to kind of include that kind of as an honorable mention here. But folks know how I feel about Forza Horizon 5, which is what part of the reason I didn't want to dive too much into it. Whereas Garret, I know you had one other game, right? That you did want to just.
I had a few other games in my head. For sure. I like Donnie would shame me if I didn't mention Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think there was a lot of more kind of like cooking and crafting elements that got into that game. Legend of Zelda's always been a franchise like you can argue as a role-playing game if you want. But it really is an action adventure puzzle game first and foremost. And I think in Breath of the Wild, they really opened up with exploration and being aimless in a 3D environment. They did a really good job with that game, and of course with the cooking and crafting alongside with it. It was an excellent. It didn't need to be the center of attention, which is great. It was just this kind of the secondhand little system. It's like, hey, try it out and get some meats and delicious little meals along with as you go along with the game. Of course, there is a big loot system now behind that game as well. And you get a lot of different weapons and armor, and those weapons kind of just get destroyed over time. So I know some people were kind of complaining about that. I personally think the durability is just fine because you got your other weapons going through as well. So
Yeah.
I had an honorable mention as Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and also Last of Us. I wanted to mention that game because there is some much needed more like crafting RPG mechanics into that game that really handled it very well. Especially, searching in every individual area, grabbing components as much as you can. I remember just playing this game. It's like, okay, let me go through each and individual room. Let me grab all the basic materials and whatever, and let me craft as much different items as I can, like a throwing knife or a grenade or a potion or whatever. That really lend itself to the gameplay of Last of Us, and that's why I really enjoyed that game. So yeah, I had to put those honorable mentions out there. One of the biggest games out there has some RPG mechanics in there.
I'm actually curious if they actually add more RPG elements to the remake of Last of Us, like Last of Us Part 1.
Me too.
If they increase more of that stuff. That'd be interesting if they do that. And also Breath of the Wild is like probably the closest a 3D Zelda game has ever gotten to be an RPG. I would argue
Yes.
that actually the closest Zelda has ever been to an RPG is Zelda 2 on the NES, to the point
Mhm.
where the enemies have, when you hit them, they have like hit points above their head, to the point
Oh,
where
that's
you're leveling
interesting.
up Link with new abilities and stuff like that. It's not a full action RPG, but it's pretty darn close. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought Breath of the Wild too, because a lot of people also probably would have thought of that one as well, and I think that's a good choice. Well, let's hear from some of the listeners, Garrett, because we got a couple before we go. We're going to start with Smooth423, who says, "Hear me out, Minecraft. Do you think Minecraft is a non RPG with RPG mechanics? The Minecraft books make it seem so too. Also, the Minecraft audiobook with Jack Black, Minecraft The Island, is a great listen. I highly recommend it." Yeah, I mean, I actually told Smooth423 in the Discord this after they posted their question. I'm like, yeah, I think this totally counts. I think that
Oh yeah.
Minecraft is totally got a ton of RPG elements in it. Your character levels up, and there's like a really deep crafting system, like you'd see in other crafting RPGs. Like I think it really fits the bill. I don't think it's a total RPG, but I think it's definitely like in the same vein as a lot of the action games that Garrett talked about on my list. What do you think,
Oh,
Garrett?
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I love Minecraft, and of course, the central part of Minecraft is crafting.
yeah,
It's all about crafting, and that is an RPG mechanic. Whether or not you think of it's very essential in RPG. So there's definitely a connection there, and of course, the level up system behind it. Even though the level up system doesn't really give you much anything other than just, I think like enhancements and weapons or something like that.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of RPG elements baked into that system, which I really like in Minecraft.
Yeah. Next up, we got Nagachaka at Nagachaka on Twitter, who says, "Golf Story is definitely one of my favorites. It's a fantastic golf game with RPG mechanics like leveling up specific golf gear skills and optional side quests. Nintendo needs to shadow drop Sports Story at the next Nintendo Direct." So actually, Golf Story, I didn't pick it for this list and went with NHL instead
Hmm.
because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Garrett, but I really feel like Golf Story really like qualifies as an RPG. And when I think of that game, I think of it as an RPG rather than an RPG with a non-RPG with RPG elements.
Yeah, Golf Story. I played some of it. I didn't play all the way through. There is a linear story. Is there a level up system
Yeah,
of any kind?
yeah,
Okay, yeah. If there's a level up system, I mean, that's hard to ignore. That's probably a role playing game first because you're a character. You're
yeah,
going through a story, and you have a level up system and some skills along with it,
yeah.
and you progress those.
There's also
So
gear
yeah.
with your different, golf gear that you get as well, which is kind of like your equipment. So, yeah, I think that it kind of fits the RPG bill a little bit more, but you're on the right track, Nagachaka. And also I kind of equate it to the Game Boy Advance version of Mario Golf, which is made by Camelot. That was actually the game they
Oh
made
yeah.
after Golden Sun, the second Golden Sun game, which is basically just Mario Golf's version of Chrono Trigger, essentially, where it's just totally an RPG, like 110%. But
Interesting.
that's how I felt about Golf Story as well when I tried that one out. But this is one of those times where I wish Donnie Reese was here because I would defer to him on this the judgment of this one.
Hmm.
But last up, Skinny Matt at Skinny Matt K says, "I was curious about how you feel about buying skills in a skill tree, specifically for a game like Yakuza 0. I'm on the fence about buying your skills, but personally I feel like Yakuza does it very well because it allows you to customize your playstyle." And he also claims that we've come a long way since buying your skills from the weapon shop in Final Fantasy 1. So even though he's not, I guess he's pointing out Yakuza 0 has some RPG elements. I don't think either of us have played Yakuza 0, right, Garrett? Like, have
I
you played
played a
it?
little bit of Yakuza Zero. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Does it feel like an
Yeah.
RPG in any
It's
way, or have RPG
well, I
mechanics?
think it definitely has RPG mechanics in there. It is I would say it's a beat 'em up first and foremost, but you are a character progressing through a story. And there's some beat 'em up levels here and there, and skills is one of them. Buying your skill, and it has a money currency system in there, so for sure, buying your skills I think is an essential mechanic in the Yakuza franchise. What I think of it, I think it's good if you balance it correctly. I think
Mhm.
like you have enough currency, skill points, whatever it is, in order to get what you want, to essentially choose your skills and have the option, and that's up to the developer. So I'm glad that Yakuza does it the right way. I wonder what you mean that term buying though, because there's just like I feel like a lot of role playing games you can phrase buying into so many different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it applies to a lot of role playing games where you're just sacrificing some currency of energy, skill points, or money or whatever in order to choose the skill that you want.
Yeah, you're not just going to a store and handing over money for skills, but you're still handing over something, whether it's skill points or something else. Like, yeah, it feels the same. And yeah, to your point, like having balance is the proper way of doing it. Like we talked about that in the Monarch review and how unbalanced that we thought that was. Where it was just like you have to basically like filter all your experience points into like one thing, and it's very annoying. It was not balanced at all, but other games really balance it really well. So yeah, I don't mind it as well. Like even if a game has it where you have to go to a physical store to buy your skills and stuff like that, I don't mind that in a game, just as long as the currency's balanced, so it's not a feel bad essentially. Like that's all I don't dislike about it. But anyways,
I agree.
I think that's gonna wrap up this particular episode of the RPG Game. But before we go, Garrett plugs go.
You can follow me at Twitter at Bland Explosion. You can also find me on the Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network, where we're live every Thursday nights over at twitch.tv/PSVG and over at YouTube. And we release on all podcast services, including Spotify, Amazon, whatever you choose to listen to. And that's pretty much it.
All the places. Just search Nintendo on Spotify. I swear Nintendo Shack is always like 5th or 6th in that list that always comes up. Getting that SEO results over there. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. So, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 53rd level of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.